Okay. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Even though we had some technical issues, this will not break us. This will make us stronger. Yay. Um, to, my name is Shelly Shore. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Operationalizing Peer Support Program Manager for now until someone else takes my position, and I'll be excited about that. I'm also the Peer Support Policy and Planning Manager. We are going to have a very special webinar today. We are going to talk about how sharing your story can break the stigma. We're going to address stigma the peer way today. And what does it mean? It means that we're not just going to discuss it or provide information. We're going to share experiences. And we'll start with a very short review or refresher of what stigma is and continue with stories from very special guests, peers, LaTonya Rogers and chez Bowser. Am I saying your last name correctly, chez? So LaTonya is a peer support specialist. She's a King County at the King County Behavioral Health. She's been a CPC since 2012. LaTonya came into the work through her lived experience as a parent, supporting her children, navigating their complex needs through the mental health and SUD child serving systems. chez has been a CPC since 2012. She started her work as a youth peer for Wraparound Wise. Currently, she's a student in the Human Services program at Highline College and working at Guided Pathway Support as well as alongside the KC3. chez knew ever since she was a teenager that she wanted a career that promotes wellness in the lives of young people, and she's always inspired by the youth she crossed paths with. And both LaTonya and chez can tell you much more about what they do. This is just an introduction. Before we go to chez and LaTonya's stories, I think it would be great if we could do like a short refresher, like I mentioned, on stigma and why it's so important for us to address this today. And you know, we have peer webinars. This is a peer webinar, but also with a little different angle, supporting supervisors and program managers. And so you will see how we connect all of that with the peer stories today. So what is stigma? You know that, but let's just say it again. Stigma is discrimination against an identifiable group of people, a place, a nation. Stigma about people with substance use disorders and mental health challenges might include inaccurate or unfounded thoughts like people are dangerous, people are incapable of managing their treatment. Often the word they is used, creating more othering and basically saying they are not me. These are other people. And so the stigma comes from all kinds of places, we know that. But basically around behavioral health and substance use, mental health, it may come from old notions, old ideas that, you know, create this notion of being misunderstood. And we know today that people can recover and lead healthy life even when experiencing mental health challenges. And sometimes because the people are experiencing that, because we know that recovery is not just bouncing back, it's bouncing forward. And we can talk about post-traumatic growth, but maybe we can talk about it in a different time. So how does stigma affect people with behavioral health challenges? Individuals might feel stigmatized and creates this situation where they're not seeking treatment. And we can talk about self-stigma, how people feel unworthy of treatment or incurable or unable to recover. And so stigma just makes these notions stronger, unfortunately. And negative stereotypes about people with behavioral health challenges can make others feel, can make people feel all kinds of feelings towards individuals with behavioral health challenges, um, anger, fear, all the things that really create a situation where it is, again, harder to seek help or to feel understood or feel part of a society. And that's why we definitely want to work on eliminating or reducing or smashing stigma, whatever word you want to use. So how can we make a change? Couple ways that we are talking about are when talking or about people that experience behavioral health challenges, we want to make sure to use words that are not stigmatizing. We want to use person-first language, not person-first stigma, no. Which focuses on the first person, not the illness, not the situation, removing words that that have negative meanings. And obviously you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of saying a bipolar person, a person with bipolar, this is very straightforward, very familiar to all of you, I'm sure. Also, we want to ask people what kind of way they want to describe themselves. What are some words that they use? A little bit about like culture. We don't just assume that we know everything. We want to ask questions. We want to be practicing humility when we talk to individuals. And you know, it doesn't have to be an individual with behavioral health challenges. Today, we want to foster that with any individual that we encounter. And so, like I mentioned, these are just a couple of ways to address stigma or reduce stigma. But the biggest way, and the one that we're going to talk about today, is by utilizing peers, or how peers in the workforce can reduce stigma. And so I really enjoy talking about how peers are the face of hope. We know that. They provide the idea, they bring this idea that recovery is possible. And when peers work in an agency, they provide this notion and idea and experience, not just for the individuals experiencing behavioral health, for their families, for the agency, for providers. And how many providers and how many times maybe did we feel, and you know, I was a provider, and I can admit that sometimes, you know, you feel jaded, you feel tired, you feel exhausted of seeing the same individual coming in. And peers create, you know, an environment when you see a peer coming in and working in the agency, you understand, you get it. Peers show you that we can recover, we can move forward. And it's very hopeful for, like I mentioned, people working in the agency and individuals that are part of the service recipients. And so we're going to talk much more about it today, but this is the idea that we're bringing today, how sharing your story as a peer can create a situation where stigma is being able to rest and not be a force that really like a storm that creates all that damage and all the things that we absolutely don't want to experience and see as individuals providing services and individuals receiving services. So this is why today felt really important for me to bring this idea with the help of my guests. And we want to inspire everyone, and we want to inspire the supervisors, definitely the peers, the agency administrators, to listen to the stories, to pay attention to the stories, to realize that stories are real. And so when you hear the stories today, pay attention to a few ideas. We want to pay attention to how the cultural background of an individual plays a role in stigma and in service provision, and how can we see sometimes layers of stigma according to the culture that the individual comes from. We want to pay attention to aspects of providing services to an individual, to a youth, to a family, and some other ideas about, how sometimes as a provider, you suggest the easy solution, an easy idea to solve a problem, and it's really not as easy. And if you haven't been there and haven't experienced that, you don't know how tough it is and how traumatizing sometimes. So I think now's the time for our guests to share some of their stories and how, they've experienced mixed blessings with behavioral health challenges and experiences of their own and their loved ones. And we'll try to save some times at the end for questions that you might have. And you can write questions in the chat if you're interested in doing that. And I think I'll turn it to our guests. Good morning, LaTonya. Good morning, chez.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm glad to be here this morning.
Thank you. I think, maybe something to start with will be, how do you feel that showing up as a peer, you were able to reduce stigma in situations? And is it different when working with individuals experiencing behavioral health challenges, or with youth, or with families, as far as your experience goes?
Awesome. chez, you want to go first?
I'll let you go first.
All right. Sure. Yeah, so that's definitely a great place to start. As you shared in the introduction, I come into the work with my lived experience as a parent, and from that right there starts off around what does that look like for me? Yes, I also have some challenges around with navigating, not wanting to navigate those systems because of fears of being a parent and the stigmatizing ways that we will be treated. We have been treated when we search for, even looked at services, or being misrepresented when you talk about, oh, you don't look like that you need help, and I'm not coming for help for me, but I am because of my family. So I definitely think that families have a tendency to come to show up and maybe not feel very comfortable because of the history and the culture. I show up, I represent, I come in as a Black mom. When I walk out the door, I can't change that, right? And I wouldn't want to, but I'm here because I'm in need, and I'm looking for that support for my kids, right? And when we get those looks, and I know a lot of you on this webinar today have experienced when you already are feeling already stressed, and then you walk into a situation and you don't feel that you're going to get the support. It's almost ready to turn around, right? So how could I show up and say I'm ready to, or I'm looking for some help for my kids, and expect them to want to show up as well and be there for them? So just being mindful that the voice of the young person that you are engaging is important, and how their needs can be met and be supported is going to be something that makes a difference in their treatment and their recovery, and how you show up, to be able to say, yes, I'm here. Let's really talk about what's going on. You got to be about it and not just have that lip service, because young people will definitely notice and they will definitely shut down. And then it makes it more challenging for a parent to step into that space and say, well, yeah, he's kind of right. They're kind of right. So.
Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense. And I'm thinking about, yes, young people, teens, they feel, they realize when I arrive to a place with my daughter experiencing behavioral health challenges, and I feel apologetic or feel the shame, feel the blame, right? All the feels, and I show that or I express that, what kind of message am I giving my daughter? What kind of message are we giving the individual that we're serving, right? And what kind of opportunity it is for us to give voice to others and not just absolutely represent and advocate when needed, but also let that individual represent and advocate for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we have had conversations around what that looks like as what a peer looks like in our peer community, right? And sometimes we need to support one another by just like yesterday or the other day, we were reminding one another around what that looks like for a parent and how we felt so different when we are approaching or we are spending time in our peer community. And then when we are sharing or in a situation where it's not the same, or like we're in a meeting and then you're showing up and people are looking at you a little different, or how they respond, or they feel like, oh, wow, you got a lot going on, when you're gonna say, well, I'm a parent with lived experience, or I've been just left because I had to go to the school, or this and that, it's already making you feel like, should I even share that, right? But when you're with your peer community, you don't feel as isolated, you feel supported. And so I think that's what we need to think about when families and individuals show up to places, around how we look, how we act, how we respond, how we engage with them from the beginning, definitely will change the relationship and build and encouraging those relationships along the way. So.
Lachey, anything you want to add to that?
Let's see. So, we all live within a society that likes to place, certain privileges for certain identities, and other identities do not get afforded that same sort of privilege. And I'm someone who has intersectionality within the marginalized identities that I have. I'm a person of color, I'm Black, I am femme presenting, I identify as LGBTQ+, and having all of that combined in a society that tells you certain ways of being are basically wrong, like you're not allowed to be that way, or you're just not as good being that way. And then adding, mental health on top of it, which is something that, we all have, but is already so stigmatized, and being a person that's already viewed kind of negatively by some just for existing. It was tough, in trying to find that space to open up. I know for myself, growing up, there was a lot that I kind of kept to myself because it just seemed like I was the problem. Like there's something fundamentally wrong with me, and because it's me, I can't really go to anyone about this, not wanting to like burden people or whatever. So that's how stigma really impacted me, and having experiences where like, I try to open up, but I'm opening up to not the best people, like showing my friends this is what I'm going through. And because they weren't really so much my friends, now I find myself sitting alone at a table while the table next to me is full of people that's just chattering and talking about me, where I can hear that it's happening. And stigma just, it makes you feel like you're all alone and like that's your fault. And that's not a feeling that I wish on anyone, because life is too big. There's too many people on this planet for us to label that certain people are good and certain people are bad, and certain ways of being and existing are just not acceptable. So that's how it really got me growing up. I just felt like I couldn't talk about these things. And when I tried to open up, if I went a bit too deep, like I was in a counseling group in high school, the lady mentioned family counseling. I mentioned that to my family, and especially in like communities of color, there can be kind of this need to want to save face and like protect your family. You don't want people to come into your business and like judge you and tell you what you're doing wrong and make you feel bad for, you know, the way that you're parenting or the way that you're doing things. So, you know, I wasn't aware of all that sort of stigma. So to me, it's just like, you know, why are we shutting this down? But growing up and seeing more of life and having conversations with my parents, seeing how stigma on that end too can keep people from getting help, because, you know, we don't want to be judged. You know, we're all out here doing our best with life, and there can be a whole lot of judgments out there. And, you know, I've felt that. And like I said, you know, it's not something that I wish on people to feel. So being able to be in a position to be a peer and to share my story with others who are going through similar things, for me, it was healing to be able to connect with so many people when I was in a place where I was not able to connect with people on these things. And it was just a part of my life that I had to pretend didn't happen. And then, you know, healing for those that I work with, because they're able to see themselves out in the world, and the fact that there's a place for them. You know, there are people like me, people who feel the things that I feel. So the fact that I'm feeling this, you know, doesn't make me wrong. You know, it's okay, and things are going to be okay. You know, may not be right now, but, you know, I have people in my corner who get it, who've been there, done that, and they've been able to make it to a point where things just don't feel as big and scary as they used to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say that's how showing up as a peer has helped me to break and reduce stigma. Stigma can make you feel so alone, and I get to use my story to show people that, you know, you're not. You're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you.
Thank you, Lachey. Shelley, I was wanting to just quickly share. Lachey reminded me of an opportunity that we talk about that stigma. And I remember going into, when we were first being able to go back before we could be in person at a CPC training, certified peer counselor training. And I came in a room, in a space, and everyone was there. And I was just speaking to everyone, saying hello, good morning. And as the afternoon went on, the morning went on, and that towards the lunchtime, right before that, there was an opportunity I was sharing and training and presenting, and some parts of my story of how I came to the work and why I'm here, and how it related to your role as a certified peer counselor. By the lunchtime, there just was a particular young lady was there, and I noticed that she was very quiet and really didn't have a lot of conversation, and was just kind of really looking at me for, but just not in any mean way, but just really studying me, I would kind of say. And at the lunch, she came up to me, and it happened to be an African-American young lady. And she said, "Can I say something to you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I noticed," she said, "I feel kind of bad, but when I noticed when you first came in, it was like you were happy. You came in, you were speaking to everybody, and it was like you kind of not really commanded the room, but the room felt, you changed the energy in the room. Then you were sharing your story, and parts of your story, I felt like that's me. Like, I've been in a situation where I'm going through with my kids and going in and out of treatments, and them running away and not going to treatment and things like that." And then I was like, "What?" And she said, "I didn't ever realize that you're a certified peer counselor. That's what I want to be. And I had no idea that someone that looked like you could be going through the things just like me." And I said, "Yeah." And so when you're out there supporting people and supporting other mothers, remember that. I said, that's a teachable moment right there. We all show up differently, right? We all show up what you may not expect. But that right there was definitely an opportunity to bust some of those stigmas about how an individual mommy or person can look when they show up in a situation. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah. And that's a powerful story that talks about peerhood and talks about, also, like, we have so many things in common, but we don't always see all of these things. And when we sat together, LaTonya, Lachey, and I, you could say we are different, but we had so many things that we could relate on, on different levels. And so definitely the face of hope, there's no such thing, the face of hope. It's the faces of hope, right? Because we have so many faces and so many ways to present ourselves, and peers are just everything and everywhere, and so there's not just one face, and that's something to make sure everyone realizes. And I always say that if you're not a peer yet, just wait for it, because there's no way in this world, with everything that we're experiencing right now as a community and a culture and a country, that any person will not experience something like that, if not with themselves, but with the people around them. So we are all peers, and try to make that clear when we talk about that. So one more thing that I wanted us to chat about was, when peers go to work, they go to work with everything that they have experienced. And so one of the qualifications as far as CPC is to be a year in recovery. It's not always the same with other places that, that peers work not as CPCs, but you kind of want to come from a place that you can work with others, and the assumption is that you have worked on some things, that you're on your own journey, right? So how do you feel about that, and what are your experiences as far as, dealing with your own I don't know, experiences, challenges, memories when you work with someone else? How difficult it is, how easy it is, how challenging, and what supervisors need to know about the peer work with this aspect specifically?
So with that one, yes, it's definitely important to have that recovery piece, because, you are in a position where you're working alongside people who they're currently facing some things that are very similar to things that you've been through, and that can be triggering and re-traumatizing, experiencing vicarious trauma, all that stuff. And it's important to be in a place where you're just a bit better than where you would have been at the start of your journey with things, because, we don't want to put people in a position where they end up like backsliding, so to speak. But also important to acknowledge that, recovery is not a linear process. It's not like, a year has passed and I'm unrecovered and now I'm recovered and I'm good. And it just doesn't work like that. Recovery is an ongoing process that you work towards every day. And some days are easier than some, and some days are, very challenging. And I've definitely been in positions where, I definitely consider myself to be recovered. Coping skills that I used to rely on are no longer a part of my story in the ways that I go about, protecting myself and healing myself. But I've definitely had experiences where, kiddos that I'm working with are just going through things that they just touch a very personal place of my heart in my own story, and things that I thought, I haven't thought about in years. I must be over it. Now all of a sudden the floodgates opened and I'm not as good on that thing as I thought I was. And being able to recognize when that happens, so that you could take a step back and view yourself and take care of yourself, so that it doesn't turn into a thing where, you know, you're now projecting onto the people that you're trying to support or help. And that's important too for supervisors to recognize that, you know, your peers, you know, they've been through these things, and you just want to do your part to support them. And, you know, even the stigma around that, asking for help, can be very challenging. You don't want to seem like you're not a professional, or you're not good enough, or like you're not recovered. But like, we're all humans and things pop up and things aren't always so easy. And just being able to have that compassion for, as a supervisor, having that compassion for the peers that are working there, and as a peer, being able to have compassion for yourself. And just because you're having a hard time doesn't mean you're not a recovered person. And being able to have that space to just take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself if you're going to be able to take care of others.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop talking for a bit and let someone else.
You are right on that, and around really like realizing that it's a process, like you said, and having an opportunity to have supervisors that have that understanding and knowledge around how, you know, peers are awesome, right? And to be able to support a peer may look different than a supervisor may have had in the past been able to experience. So having the knowledge and the continuing willingness to work on how do we show up, how does a supervisor show up to be able to support a peer? What does that look like? And not diminishing or making them feel they're less than a professional than anybody else, right? And they have a lot to offer. That's why we're there. And being able to be askable is very important. Reminding yourself as a supervisor of the things that you go through your life, right? Shelley was said earlier, if we keep going, most of us will be a peer. And then in a lot of ways we are, even if you're not a certified peer counselor, there's times in your life that you show up and you're supporting someone, and you're reminding yourself about your experiences, and what you went through, and what were some of the tools and things that you did to be able to support getting through those, I say ups and valleys and mountains and hills, right? To get back to where a place where you feel okay. And if a supervisor can show up in that way and being able to talk about and supporting of, so how do we move forward? How do you want to move forward? Just as you would want to work with a peer, and it's about what the goals are of how to move through when you do get to situations where you feel maybe you've been triggered, or you feel that you have not felt safe in a situation where working with someone, showing up and being very honest, and the supervisor being able to support you and being honest too on how to work through that is going to be important too. So I do think it's important, Shelley, around when we talk about the length of time that you have before you step into the role of a certified peer counselor is important, because, you know, things that LaTonya has talked about, having those tools and those readiness to be able to say, yes, I'm in a place where I can support someone, or I have my recovery in a place where I feel that when I can show up and be there to empower and support and walk alongside and give hope, right? For me, as a parent, I was ready and not knowing I was ready. And I was doing a lot of that already. But I also had to remind myself around when you were getting too much, when you were seeing yourself getting too involved, where your family, the things around you were starting to fall down again. And now you're back to needing to be here, right? And being able to have that, you know, and having your peer community to be there for you. So I think that's important too, to really know that you want to be able to reach out, get supports.
Right.
Yeah. I want to add really quick too, like as peers, kind of being able to like walk the talk, so to speak, like the
Mm.
same things that we preach for the people we're supporting, we need to be implementing within our own lives.
Yeah.
Like, we talk about, that having your natural supports, that was something that I had to really lean in for myself as I was doing this work. Like, my mom is quick to call out when she notices little changes in me. If it seems like I'm really diving myself into an area where I'm not going to be able to reel myself back so easily, she'll call it to my attention and just do things with me to help take my mind off of things. Let's watch a movie, let's watch a TV show, let's just have tea and talk. And
Being
having
your peer support.
being my own peer.
Yeah.
It saves me, it helps me so much to be able to have my own support system and just utilizing the tools that I promote for other people.
Absolutely. Walk the talk. I agree with that. I agree with that so much. And I think there are subtleties between, a peer for individuals and a youth peer and a parent peer. It's a little bit different, but it's also very much the same in some other aspects. And I'm thinking, you probably, I'm thinking about maybe myself as a parent peer. I have not worked as a parent peer, but I've lived experience as a parent peer. And so working as a therapist while having things happening at home, it was very difficult at sometimes in some situations. And you want to be able, the ideal is to be able to recognize those times and exercise like the best self-care, or maybe say, I cannot do this right now, because sometimes it is too soon, it is not the right time. And we want to be fair to ourselves, we want to be fair to our families, we want to be fair to the individuals that we're serving. If we are not in the state of mind to serve others, then maybe we should take a break, maybe we should think about it, or maybe we should utilize those tools that we preach about. But yeah, it is definitely something that we would like to take the supervision if we can, which kind of brings me to the question of, how did, maybe you had some experiences of working with supervisors and continuing to reduce stigma while doing that. And if it was always a safe place or safe space to really talk about these things, and if not, what do supervisors need to know if they are not peers themselves as far as working with peers? Kind of want to gauge your opinions about that.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and jump in for this question first. I have to say, I have had some incredible supervisors that I would not even, in my years, and I will say since I've worked in the division of behavioral health, some great supervisors who I will say showed up in a way that allowed me to continue to be professional, didn't minimize my skills or who I was as a parent, as a person, and treated me with total respect and dignity, and made a safe space for us to have these conversations, that treated me like I was worthy, like, because I'm a parent of kids or have experienced loss of a child, I'm still a person, I'm still there, I show up in my role, and continue to support me in that way was real important to me. And be able to give, remind us about who we are, that we do come with our lived experience. But when we show up to do a job. We want to be there to do our job and support others. I think it's important to, as a supervisor, again, like I said before, if you don't know, being askable, being able to have a place where you're gonna, that time in using supervision to talk about what are some of the things that how it went. What are some of the things that may be challenging for you that week or that day? Can we talk about what was something that really stood out, that was really empowering, or really made you feel like you felt accomplished on something? So I think not just looking at some of the negatives, but what are some of the positive places or successes that we talk about in the work? I think really that's important too. And also remember, supervision is not time for therapy, and I think as a peer, we talk about that, there's a place where when you're talking about supervision, that's time for supervision, and being able to share with the peer, the CPC, sounds like there is a time that you need to get some support and be able to allow them to be able to do that. Would you like to go back, and do you think it's time for you want to check in with your therapist? Are you seeing the therapist, but really support them in that place, but not be the therapist for the peer? I think that gets that blurred line too of how do we use the tools as a peer to help support ourselves and stay in a safe, healthy place.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you.
I would say I appreciate in supervision when, supervisors are kind of creative with their check-in questions.
Yep.
Because if you just ask me how I'm doing, I'm good. I'm not going to get too deep into it, no matter what may be kind of bubbling under the surface. I remember having a supervisor when I first started in Wraparound Wise, and she had asked me a question I'd never been asked before, and she was just curious, like, what does it look like for you, like when things may be starting to kind of fall apart? Like, she wanted some signs to look out for. Like, do you have your hoodie up over your head? Do I know that means Lachey's kind of having a bad day and I should check in? And I had no idea at the time. I had no idea what that looks like. I'll keep you posted. But she definitely planted a seed, and my mind would return back to that question, and it got me more reflective and self-aware. And I was able to realize, like, a big sign for me that, Lachey isn't doing well is if Lachey is not eating, because I love food. But when
Yes.
when I get really overly stressed out, my body rejects food. I cannot eat. So if you notice that Lachey's not eating, Lachey's having a hard time, or just being more quiet than usual. I'm already a pretty quiet person, but if I'm even more so backed in the corner, just trying to keep my mouth shut, it's probably because I've got a lot going on my mind. And I just, so appreciate being asked that question, because I hadn't been asked something like that before. And it got me thinking about ways that I can look out for these things in myself. And how can I let others in on the fact that, hey, I need some additional support right now, or I need some space to go and take care of myself. So yeah, just being creative with the ways that you check in, because if it's a superficial check-in, we're very focused on wanting to support, our people and the peers that we are working with. And we'll kind of put ourselves on the back burner, or, even stigma showing up in that space. I don't want to say that I'm having a hard time. That's going to make me look unprofessional or something, even though I'm a human and we all have it. Sometimes stigma can really just make us forget that fact.
Yeah.
So yeah, supervisors, just being creative with the ways that you check in and look out for your people.
I think that's a really good point, and creativity is a big piece of working with others, as far as I'm concerned. And we talk about it in training for supervisors on, this is an allyship, working with peers. There are so many parallel processes. So if you're working as a provider for individual, you want to be respectful, you want to be curious, and you don't want to assume things about that individual, right? Same goes in supervision, and I don't care if it's a peer or a therapist or a med provider. You want to be curious, you want to ask questions and ask, do you need any kind of support? And then if you do, what kind of support? Don't assume that they need this and that, and manage up, supervise up. So make sure this is a safe space so the peer can bring their own challenges. But like you mentioned, both of you, LaTonya and LaTonya, if you don't feel like this is an environment that you could bring your own authentic self, and realize that being professional is also being personal sometimes about your experiences as a peer. I do feel like this is the profession. So this is your profession, being personal, sharing your stories. So why can't it be the same in supervision? Again, this is not therapy. It shouldn't be therapy, but it can get personal, and we can talk about the things that make our work worthwhile. And this is, the stories, the narratives, not the clinical. That's another way for supervisors to be supportive of peers, not to go to those clinical places in supervision. Go to the narrative, go to the stories, go to the point of view of the individual served. As you represent that as a peer, that's the voice that you bring to the team table, and not just be like everyone else. Be you, be who you are as a peer. We don't have a lot of time, so I do want to open a few minutes for anyone who wants to ask a question. I know, I think Samantha had her hand up. I don't know if it's still something you want to ask. Yes.
Shelly, real quick, I just wanted to add that little last piece too about a supervisor. What is helpful is really be supportive. We talk about that, like supporting like with others in the agency. If I feel like my supervisor got my back, I feel that they know and they trust me, and they know that I'm here showing up to do the work, and they're going to show that with the other therapists or other counselors or folks that the co-workers that I'm working with as well. So
absolutely. And having a strengths-based approach, very important. Thank you for that. Angelica, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you to both of you for your stories. I really value and honor them. I just want to know, I'm new to the field. I'm a peer support specialist at Rachel's Women's Center. It's a day center for women who are homeless. And my question to you is, thank you. How do you not, or what do you do when it's hard not to think about them when I get home. It's like, how do you deal with that, not taking your work home, and what do you do for yourselves to keep grounded and focused, like not to, because burnout is very real in our field. So how do you guys manage that?
Can I say something?
Does it have to do with the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel that way all the time. And yes, I do think about my peers when I'm at home, and it's just something that happens. And it is difficult to at least try and keep those feelings from not becoming overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
You just cannot become too involved, and that's just something that you, as an individual, you have to work at. But that does happen. That is an issue, and it is something that, as an individual, we need to come to a compromise.
Thank you,
Ben. So I'd like to just share with you. For me, I always say when I step out my house, I'm moving in the work of a certified peer counselor, right? But when I step back in, I'm mommy, I'm somebody's wife, right? Doesn't mean that I don't forget that I'm a peer at all times, but I also tell myself this is my time, and then just like a coat, I have to take that off. I can pick it back up, but I have to take it off. And that may be getting my mind thinking about other things. So I'm walking into my next space, maybe coming home and thinking about, okay, this is what I need to do. These are things I got to do, so that I'm keeping myself grounded in my life, in the life that's going on right in front of me, knowing that I can pick that up when I pick my coat up and go back out. The work's going to be there. And so also doing that. Also taking care of yourself. I have a closet that some folks on here that know that, as I had 6 kids. And so when time came home, I had to go in there, and mommy needed 10 minutes to take off the coat and pick up where mommy is, but also allow me to have Tonya time, right? To get myself grounded in that. And sometimes that needed 15 minutes. So it is something that you definitely need to do. And I say, keep working on it. Don't just say, okay, I'm not gonna do it. Keep working on it, because you do need to give yourself in your inner spirit that for yourself. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I
Um,
think Samantha.
Yeah, Samantha and Francisco have questions. So go ahead, Samantha.
Yeah, I was just to bounce off of what everybody is mentioning, and thank you so much for sharing. I got a lot out of your both of your talks today, so thank you. I do a lot of testifying for legislature in regards to behavioral health and past experiences, lived experiences. And what I found is that same thing. It's really hard. Oftentimes I have found that in the past, I get caught up in what I was trying to convey or write, and although that is my intention, I can't get too much into that, because it'll just kind of suck me into it, like how you go home with your work. And so what I've found is there's times for me to be analytical about it. Like these are the points that, and so I've actually found that helps really well in transferring from personal life to work life. Also is being able to come home, have boundaries, and be like, yo, I just walked in the door. I am not even in the house yet. Don't talk to me, right? With my kids. But it gives me a time to kind of set that, like transition a little bit. And that's so helpful, because there's times when you're getting into advocacy work where when you're working with other people to bring up your own past experiences that you may not have identified yet, right? And worked with. And so that is a huge growth period. It's very messy and it's very beautiful, but it's also a lot of work. So I thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people in the chat are talking about a buffer, something that they put aside, something either physical or symbolic. Amy talked about the coat that you put in the car, or Simon talked about the bag, kind of a buffer, if once when we were driving, a lot of people are still driving from home back home, put your favorite music, or just use that drive as a buffer, or anything that could symbolize that transition, I guess. Francisco, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, Angelica, I think one of the things that really does help tremendously with being able to separate my work from my personal life is, once at the end of the day, I have a tea maker here, and I drink a tea, here in my office. And then instead of going straight home, I go for a small drive just so I can decompress. Because you really don't want to take your work with you. That's one of the things that I learned really quick. Because once you start taking your work with you, it affects your personal life as well. And also, it reflects and bounces back. It will affect your work. So that's what I found interesting and helpful, that I was able to do that. Some people can be a little bit challenging, and that's just nature, human nature. But
Well, I think you made some good points on having that space, and when you're and having a buffer and talking about it. I want to say that I think it's a place too where we keep our work at work. We talk about that, when you come home and say, how was your day? Literally, not sharing about that day. Let's talk about, wow, on the drive, I noticed this, or something different, because then it's like you're blending it, coming home saying, wow, today I had this going on. Or think about something that you felt really accomplished about, you can remember in your journey, in your story, where you may have been and where you're at today. That made me feel really good. Like, ooh, I'm glad I'm here right here today. So.
And I know, Simon, you have your hand up. We do need to finish. So if you have a quick remark, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, howdy.
Howdy.
I just wanted to say, it's more of a comment. I think it's important to remember that stigma is not ours. Stigma is something that has been put on us. If we are peers, if we're in the workplace, anything like that. And so breaking the stigma is important, but it's not an individual thing. And I also just want to say thanks, everybody. I gotta go too. I'm like in another meeting currently, but yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Simon. That's a really good point. You know, it's not ours. We don't have to do that, but it's kind of also a mission sometimes to help reduce stigma. But you are absolutely right. This is not ours. So I want to give LaTonya and LaTonya a big thank you. And if you have any closing remarks, please do. LaTonya, LaTonya, okay. Please join me next time, April 25. We're going to have Professor Larry Davidson talk about the role of the peer in a recovery-oriented system of care. LaShay, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. LaTonya, you as well. And thank you all for joining us today. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for being in the space.
Thank you.